Welcome to Confabulous 2021 and our next panel, which is What's Queer and Good in New TV and Movies. I'm joined on our panel by Catherine Lundoff, a local author, and Larry Bartell, local video person and con committee helper, so we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Don Kaiser. I want to remind you that if you have any questions or comments for the panelists, please feel free to type them into the chat in YouTube, and we can get them over to the panelists so that we can get those answered for you. So please feel free to join us through the chat in YouTube. I'm going to just go ahead and start, and I'm going to bring in Catherine and have you. Just give me one thing to start with, and we'll kick it off from there that you liked as a good queer character on TV right now.
Legends of Tomorrow. So it's on the WB. It's been around for about 7 seasons now. And if you watch the earlier seasons and didn't watch the later ones, you're missing out. They have the ship's captain is played by Kathy Lutz, who comes out as bisexual and is in a long-term relationship with another woman. A bunch of the other characters are either coded bi or are actually out as bi. A whole bunch of queer representation. So much so that I was saying before we came on here that a couple of us were sitting around having a local restaurant and somebody was asking about the show and we all began pounding the table with our fists and yelling, all the bisexuals, all the bisexuals. So people kind of backed away. It was fun.
Larry?
Good queer representation. We talked a little bit about this before too. The She-Ra cartoon, even though it's a couple years old now, had some really great queer representation on it. Some of the parents were gay parents on there. Some of the characters were queer, and the relationship that they established were all very deep, and it wasn't just throwaway lines. It was actual deep family connections shown throughout the show. So I really liked it for that.
And for me to start off, I'm going to talk about Star Trek Discovery. It had obviously a male gay relationship, and they actually were kissing on screen and everything. The chief engineer and the doctor, and then they like a lot of shows do. They killed the doctor off, but then there was again, Catherine, you were talking about some of the other shows that there was such a backlash that they actually brought the doctor back, and was back again in the second season full time. So they're now husband and husband still, and as Larry reminded me, there's also third season, starting the third season, there's a non-binary character on the show. So there's a lot of good queer representation in Discovery. So.
Do you want me to pick up and talk a little bit about some of the backlash stuff that I was talking about a few minutes ago?
All right. Yes.
You want to talk about some of the backlash stuff I was talking about a few minutes ago? Okay. So one of the things I was mentioning before we got on was a few years ago, there's a CW show called The 100. And they had one of the main characters come out as a lesbian, begin a relationship with another woman, and then they killed her character off. Which, as we all know,
it was after one episode, wasn't it? Was like one.
No,
episode?
It was a ways in. It was like they let the audience get attached, then killed her off. And if you've been watching, science fiction and fantasy and television for more than 10 minutes, this is a common trend. And there's, whole things out on TV tropes about red-shirted gay characters and so forth. What happened this time was pretty interesting. The 100 has a very young fan base. predominantly queer, but young, mostly college students and younger. And there was this huge backlash when they bumped off this character. So they got together on the various fandom boards and so forth and kicked off their own media convention. So it's now a couple of years in, takes place in Vegas every year. It's called Clexacon, after the fandom name for the two characters who were the couple. And the first year I had referred to it admittedly as the Dead Lesbian Conference, because they were bringing in like every actor who had played a queer woman who'd gotten killed off on something. And there were a lot. It's gotten better. And, over the last couple of years, they're bringing in, folks who do YouTube shows and so forth. But after the interestingly enough, after that happened and the conference really started to take off, my theory is that executives over at the WB began counting, with dollar signs in their guileless eyes, introduced a major queer character to just about every show. So any show I've seen on the CW has at least one queer character, usually more than one. And so at Clexacon, you can tell from the lineup that somebody at the WB is like walking down, the studio hallways going, you on a plane, because there's this enormous concentration of actors who play queer characters on CW shows who go to this convention. But yeah, so they did a lot of interesting things after that. They one of the daughters of the family of Black superheroes on Black Lightning comes out, and they do a really nice job of handling that within the family context. They did a new version of Charmed, in which one of the sisters is a lesbian, and again, do a decent job with that. They introduced some queer characters, the Arrowverse. Legends of Tomorrow spun off from that. And I think some of the vampires, but I kind of don't watch the vampire shows, so I'm not up on those. But yeah, it's been a really interesting shift. And it's also really interesting how quickly they caught on versus, say, I don't know, Marvel, in terms of, wait, if we do more queer stuff, it works better and we pull in more people and they stick around. Supergirl is another one that's done a nice job. Her sister comes out, is in a relationship with several different women over the course of the show. They introduced a trans character a couple of years ago and did a nice job with it. So she's a really strong and interesting character. They've also introduced queer characters on a couple of the other shows as well. So it's been interesting kind of watching that sort of title shift and what they learned from the 100.
The some of the things new things that are going on right now. There's big productions of things, and not a lot of queer representation. Catherine, you were saying, I know, Larry, you were saying that in the Wheel of Time books, there's not a lot of queer representation. I know that's a big thing coming up. Of course, right now the Dune movie is out, and of course, we all know that the Baron is not a very pleasant character, right? But but yeah, let's see. You mentioned earlier, Catherine, about Killjoys. That was on a few years ago. It's been off for a few years now, but it was on a Sci-Fi channel. So
yeah, Killjoys got up to 4 seasons. The main character has an alter ego, for lack of a better term. It's complicated. You kind of have to watch it to figure it out. But her alter ego is bisexual and in a relationship with another woman. There's a major gay character, and he and his eventual husband feature prominently in a bunch of the story arcs. And they do a really nice job with it. I mean, I think that, up until you get into, the Matrix period of big films, the concept that there would be gay people in the future was a very difficult one for a lot of Hollywood filmmakers to wrap their brains around. So you have all these science fiction and fantasy, epic-y kind of films, and there's nothing. It was Star Wars' big thing. It was like there's a couple hugging in the background of something, as an example. So it's been a long time coming, and it's still not really sticking in some respects. I gather that there's a queer couple in the Eternals, or at least a queer character. I haven't seen it yet.
Queer couple. I've not seen it, but that is correct. Yes.
But I mean, I've sat through, Black Widow and everything else, and it's like, no, no, do better. And from the reception of the Eternals, they're scared about it getting banned, in other countries. Saudi Arabia,
China,
Qatar, a couple of other places have already banned the Eternals, Nigeria. And, but the thing of it is that it's not uncommon for films from the US to get banned for a whole variety of reasons. And this is certainly not going to hurt them that much in a whole lot of other places. So it would be nice to see them step up and actually wrap their brains around the idea.
I mean, even, queer characters, even as far back as, say, like Star Trek First Contact, where Ensign Hawk, who is one of the bridge crew personnel, played by Neil O'Donoghue, I think his name is, was supposed to be a gay character. He was going to have this gay backstory, and all that got cut out because, and then, what happened to him. So it would have been another Bury the Gays character anyway. But even as far back as that, they were cutting queer storylines out. So it's really nice to see more prominent queer characters in our cinema, and I'm pretty happy about that.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to give a shout out to that's pretty recent, and they're doing a sequel now, is Charlize Theron's version of The Old Guard. And I'm describing it that way because she's the producer, which came out last year and is on Netflix and I assume elsewhere at this point. And there's a very prominent gay character in it. There's the implication that she's had relationships with women over time. And they do a really, really nice job with the gay character, the gay character couple together in terms of, showing them being very committed in terms of how they're shown and fleshed out as characters. So that one I would heartily recommend. There is some torture and some violent stuff in it. So if that's, a trigger for people, that's something to be aware of. But
and getting back to Discovery, the characters in Discovery, they have a home life. They're really in love. They're really committed to each other, and it's they've made it completely clear that they're not whole without each other. So that was a very positive thing that they did with Discovery. Larry, you mentioned something about He-Man. Was it earlier?
Yeah. So, one of the new He-Man cartoons. There's two of them. There's the Kevin Smith one, which is a continuation of the old 80s one from the Filmation production, and then there's a brand new production that reimagines Eternia as this ultra modern, neon lighted world, which it's an interesting concept. It doesn't feel like He-Man to me, but the Kevin Smith one. So traditionally, it's been Leela and Adam kind of being pushed together as a couple in the original cartoon. This one, Adam, for spoilers reasons, is absent for a little bit of the adventure, so it focuses more on Leela. And there's this possibly hinting at subtext of Leela developing feelings for another female character. And just the female empowerment aspect was great enough of focusing on her and her having a friendship with Evelyn. So all female characters in this first story arc was nice. And then the possible subtext of her and this other female character getting together was interesting to see in a He-Man cartoon. So I thought that was great.
I never got a chance to see Steven Universe, but I think you said that you had watched it, Larry.
No, I didn't watch Steven Universe.
Oh, okay.
That was me.
I hear
I've seen like one episode. Sorry, I have not seen
Steven Universe. I think there's at least one or two queer characters throughout the whole thing, the whole run. But again, have only read about it, haven't actually seen it. So
Okay. Got a comment.
we haven't
here
done
from
Winona
Larry.
Earp.
Oh yeah, go ahead and talk about Winona Earp. Sure.
Okay, so Winona Earp just wrapped its 4th season, but the Winona's sister, Waverly, comes out as bi and is in a long-term relationship with the sheriff's deputy, who eventually becomes the sheriff, whose name is improbably enough Nicole Hot. So the fandom for that one is called Way Hot, and as it would be. And there's this huge online fandom. It resembles, I think there's a lot of crossover between that and the old Xena Gabrielle fandom, where you get a lot of that kind of involvement. Winona Earp also has a prominent gay character who's has various relationships with various people. And I think, and there's other, miscellaneous characters who are walk-ons who are also queer identified. So they do a nice job with that. And it's, it's very much, it's a weird Western, show with horror elements. So there are demons and so forth. And they, but so by and large, if a character is evil and gay, that the gay part isn't the reason they're evil, and it's not the most important thing about them. It's just, oh, and by the way, there's one scene where Winona is going around executing revenants, which are sort of basically demons called back, who can only be killed by Wyatt Earp's magic gun. I'm consolidating a lot of plot here. And in one of the early episodes, one of the revenants, actually sacrifices himself because he wants to go join his partner in hell, because they were, gunfighters and assassins and bandits back in the day together. So there's kind of like interesting things that crop up here and there. But for the most part,
well, Larry,
awesome.
go ahead. No. Larry Sanderson said, I've not seen it. No, I've not seen it. Larry has. But it's a Sex Education, the show Sex Education. I think okayed for a 4th season. Have either of you two? That's something I would like to see. I have not seen it. Have either of you seen the show called Sex Education?
Is it science fiction and fantasy?
No.
I didn't think it was.
No. It has it's about modern day school counselor, basically, who his son is, I think, coming out as queer and struggling, and so but again, I've not seen it. But I know that the it is a lot about coming out queer in high school, or maybe even junior high. But Allison Janney is the mother / counselor. So I know of the show, but I have not seen it. But it's on my list of, I'd like to see that one.
Did Doctor Who finally introduce a queer character?
Not really.
Trying to think.
I mean, taking Torchwood off the table for the moment. Current Doctor Who, not.
Right. Taking Torchwood off the table. I mean, clearly, yeah, right. Captain Jack, of course, is well, omnisexual if it moves,
Well, I think they did try to introduce, transgender type characters, like with the Master and Missy, that Time Lords
Yes.
can switch between genders, and so that makes them inherently transgender. And then why the Doctor, can be a man one generation and then regenerate into a woman, and so that makes them transgender as well. I can't really think of that many gay characters, and there were a couple incidents of where even in the modern series they did bury the gays. There was one security guard where having a casual conversation with somebody else and talks about his husband, and then next scene gets offed, and they did do they tended to do a little bit of that, which was not good. So I'm waiting for like a prominent center.
Hang on. That's not true. You're right. I've got a comment here from Jason, and I'm going to paste it over.
Oh, Bill.
Bill, yes. The companion from the last season of Capaldi's Doctor was gay.
And got offed.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, did she get off? I don't know if she got off so much as she chose to join with her lover, as they kind of melted into the pool of liquid.
Yeah, I suppose that's not a spoiler anymore after a few years. Like, they did do that, but I think it fell into that trope again of you've got a queer character with a queer backstory, and let's make it more tragic by offing them.
Right.
It would have been tragic if they'd been offed anyway, but they're queer, so they get offed, and that makes it all that much more tragic. And that is the essence of burying the gays. I mean, the fact that she got to come back, was kind of incidental to that, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
But yeah, you're right.
Apropos of science fiction and fantasy shows that did a kind of fun job of handling incidental gay characters. First season of Sleepy Hollow. The premise of which there's a contemporary Black female cop working in the town of Sleepy Hollow, and various magical things happen, and she ends up partnering up, mostly involuntarily in the way of TV shows, with a revolutionary spy and courier who's come back, has traveled through time basically to fight the Headless Horseman and the various demonic powers associated with them. And at one point they're walking through downtown Sleepy Hollow, and there's two guys sitting in the cafe window holding hands, and one of them is wearing a cap, and the character who's from the Revolutionary War era said, "I didn't know that was now acceptable." And so Nicole Behary's character goes into a long speech about how times had changed, and gay people could get married, and these were all these things going on. And he turns around, looks at her, and says, "I was in the army. I know what homosexuals are." That was entertaining.
Any other suggestions from out in our audience, from shows that we've missed talking about, as far as having a good queer representation currently or in the recent past?
Well, I do have one that I just thought of.
All right.
So CW produces some DC animated movies, and one of those was the Ray, which is about a gay superhero who has to deal with that and being in the closet to his parents. So he's got all the trope of having to sneak out of his house to be a superhero, and sneaking out of his house to go on dates with men. And so he has to deal with a lot of that, and it's actually played by Russell Tovey, who was midshipman Frank from Doctor Who. Yeah.
Well, and also on Being Human.
Yep. So he's the voice for the Ray, and I thought that was a pretty good representation there. They treated the matter very well. The coming out issue was doubly cool because it was coming out as a superhero and coming out as gay. And that harkens back to conversations that have been in previous panels about the whole coming out as a superhero being an allegory for coming out as gay, like being a mutant, and being afraid of being discovered and all that kind of stuff. So I thought this was particularly well done.
Jason mentioned not sci-fi and not current, but One Day at a Time. And this panel is not necessarily about sci-fi or fantasy. It's about current TV shows with queer representation. So we're looking for anything at all. Doesn't have to be sci-fi. Doesn't have to be fantasy. Doesn't have to be animation. Doesn't have to be superhero. Just good queer representation on current TV series. But again, I have not seen the remake of One Day at a Time. Have either of you two?
I did. Yep, it was very well done, and it took it to I believe a Hispanic family, and it took it to
Yes.
that rather than having like the what was originally with the white family, Bonnie. I can't remember the actress.
Bonnie Franklin.
Bonnie Franklin. Yep. So that that was a good show in and of itself, but the remake, brought it more current. Brought the issues more like with the racial issues, and I don't remember it very well, but it did. I think it did have some queer representation in there too. I just don't remember exactly what it was. If Jason does, then
And Catherine, Jason reiterated about Legends of Tomorrow.
Much
Came in
game.
late, Jason. So we talked about that, about Legends of Tomorrow having basically the entire cast being bi, basically.
At this point, yeah. I haven't seen The Runaways, but that's supposed to have some pretty good rep. It's based on the comic book, which had several prominent queer characters in it. So
yeah, I believe 2 of the characters on there were like together.
yeah,
It was I think the girl with the dinosaur, and then the girl with the magical staff. I think didn't those 2? Was that those 2 that got together? I think.
mm-hmm.
Oh, I was wrong about sex education. Larry Sanderson corrected me. Gillian Anderson is a mother and sex therapist. Asa Butterfield is her son. His best friend, played by Nakuti Gawa, is gay. There's a gay bar in Africa scene, he says.
I had just remembered something and now it is gone. Talk amongst yourselves while I think.
I mean, we had talked earlier about Sense8, and
yeah.
you said you hadn't seen it yet, but that.
No, but go ahead and talk about it, Larry.
Well, that's a really interesting example of how connection between people can possibly bring out a sexuality. The premise, I mean, I don't think I'm spoiling anything because it's in the title. The premise is that there's these 8 people who can sense each other's thoughts across distance. Like they're all over the world. Some of them are, I believe one's in India and one's in like Italy or something, and one's in the UK. They're all spread across the world, but they can telepathically communicate with each other and essentially hop into each other's bodies in a way. And when they all get together per se, there are some very hot scenes of these 8 people, and the majority of them present as straight for most of the series, but when they're together, that connection is so strong that it becomes sexual, even if they're it crosses those boundaries, and kind of it partially says that everybody's kind of bi in a way. And it does have a lesbian gender. I forget if she's trans or if she's just gender non-binary, but it has like a couple in there, and one of that couple is played by Freema Agyeman. I can never pronounce her last name. Martha from Doctor Who, and she's in that show. So, and actually, she's the reason why I got into that show, because I love watching her.
Okay.
I just put a note asking Jason for a link to the YouTube that he's talking about.
Go ahead and talk about it. Yeah.
No.
So, yeah, Matt Baum, who's one of our guests at the last Clexacon we did, has a YouTube channel that talks about gay characters throughout history.
one gay character. I'm hoping that there is a payoff. I'd mentioned before is on Doom Patrol, played by Matt Bomer. He is playing. I forget his actual. I mean, they don't go by like their superhero names for the Doom Patrol. It's a DC product. I forget what his actual. His name is Larry, just like mine, the character's name, and he is shown to have had a history. He's gay, but he's had a history of discrimination. He was in the Air Force. He was like in the closet and all that stuff. I believe it's in the 60s or 70s, and so they went through all that. I'm hoping that him being gay and going through all that trauma and presenting that as this history has some kind of payoff for the character, because right now the character's wrapped in bandages. He can't touch anybody. He can't be near. He's radioactive, so he can't be near anybody. He can't form relationships with other gay people. And I'm hoping that down the road there is some kind of redemptive payoff to all this trauma that there. Otherwise, it's another burying the gays kind of thing, or at least torturing the gays. And I'm just hoping that there's an arc that actually gives him something that makes him being gay worth it to the audience. Just because otherwise, like I said, it's just torture and it's unpleasant in a lot of ways.
I haven't seen more than beyond the first season of American Gods, but I'm remembering that there was one of the gods is gay and is in a relationship with another man, but I think that god gets killed off, and I don't remember if there was anything more after that. Has anybody else seen any more of American Gods than that?
I've read the book, but I have not seen the show.
Okay.
In our description, we talk about Picard. I saw the first season of Picard. Larry, you did too.
Yep.
Did you like it? And try to remind me. It's been long enough now about the queer content. Was there queer content in it, or is there going to be queer content coming up? It says Picard second season. I don't know.
Throughout the first season, there wasn't like any overt queer content up until like the very last. I mean, there's some subtext going on between Seven and Rafi. Is that her name? I think.
Yes, yes.
And there's like there's just small hints that there might be at least an affection there, if not necessarily an attraction. But like one of the final scenes in the first season showed them together, kind of holding hands over a table. So it seemed like in coming up in Picard season 2, we're going to explore that relationship, and the fans are pretty much hoping that that's the case. So I thought it was a worthy successor to everything. I mean, it was a nice continuation of Picard's storyline. It advanced like the technology to where we would expect it to be, say 10, 20 years after Next Generation. It had some nice callbacks. It had some some of the people that you really love from Next Generation in it. And then the whole 7 of 9 bringing her back, and just that and then the boar, and it was huge. It was amazing. I really liked the series.
Yeah. It was a good series.
So we touched on Loki a little bit before we got on, and I haven't seen it. I've seen the usual kerfuffle online, but I haven't seen anything more than
There was nothing to it. They took all the gender fluid stuff out of Loki entirely, the usual stuff. Catherine, you mentioned earlier Batwoman too, and we haven't talked about that.
Yeah, Batwoman is a really interesting show. It's another one of the CW ones, and they took Greg Rucka and Company's Batwoman, which starts out as actually a mystery comic, and he was the main writer when it started out, and he has the character come out, and they continued it through the cycle of writers who followed after that. So the show starts off with where her character is played by a white actress, and she's definitely out. She's, comfortable being out. She's dealt with a lot of crap being out, but she has relationships with women. She has ex-girlfriends who are like family, a lot of the things that really feel real to a lot of us. The actress was injured, and it sounds like it was a really bad scene. But Ruby Rose, who identifies as non-binary, moved off the show, and they brought in a different actress. And the second actress that they brought in is Black. And so they moved her into the character role and had her dealing with aspects of, what it means for, a Black character to take over as a white superhero in a way that a lot of and now we're going to swap characters out, things don't deal with that. So they actually deal with the fact that, the white woman who was Batwoman comes from a very wealthy background. Her father runs this, paramilitary security organization, in the city. She's had access to a lot of things, whereas the character who's now Batwoman was formerly homeless. When she actually takes on the Batwoman role, she's still living in her van. She's an ex-con because she's been falsely accused of committing a crime. So there's a bunch of things in there that they actually tackle in a way that I haven't seen done with a lot of other shows, which is not to say that there weren't, the significant problems that Ruby Rose has talked about publicly, which just came out in the last couple of weeks. It sounds like they really did not handle things like stunts and so forth very well, or very safely. But in terms of how they're writing the story, they've done it really well. And that was one of the things that they did with Black Lightning too, because it was set in a predominantly Black urban community. Most of the characters were Black or people of color, and it felt, it felt real in a way that those same characters, if written by white writers, I think don't have the same feel. And I think that and I'm not sure whether the CW is actually bringing in a diverse range of writers. It certainly looks like it from some of the shows. Legends, for example, they feel like real queer people. It's not window dressing. You're not looking at it, and if you blink, you miss it. It's every time Kathy Lotz and the actress playing Ava kiss on the show, all the other characters respond positively. And if they don't respond positively, clearly they are a bad person and a villain. Which I just love to pieces. It's like, clearly there is something wrong with you because you don't love this.
Okay.
Yeah, I always liken to Legends of Tomorrow to kind of like the real world of the superhero world. What happens when you lock a bunch of superheroes into a timeshare for 6 months? Let's see what happens.
Sure.
I'm gonna throw. This is a movie that's based upon a book. Did you ever see Ready Player One? I mean, the book or the movie. Okay, well, yeah. The movie was only. I really liked the book, and I'm only mentioning it because Ready Player Two came out just this summer, or just recently, and just the book, of course. But yeah, there's two prominent gay, there's a gay male character pair and a gay female characters that are part of the Gunter people protagonists in the book. But again, the movie, when they put the movie out there, that was all, it was white, it was what do you call it, gay washed, whatever, so unfortunately.
Yeah, I didn't like the movie. I liked mostly because it had all the video game callbacks in it. I didn't care about the characters at all. But they had like movie and video game callbacks and all these like, oh, that was from that and that was from that and there's the DeLorean, there's that and that. So, the fact that there was more to the characters intrigues me to read the book now. Even though, like you said, it's a lot different. But the fact that the movie had so many callbacks had me at DeLorean. So. You know, and why can't we have both? Why can't we both have good queer representation and DeLoreans?
Works for me.
Right. Larry, question for you. Jason says, does YouTube not allow links to YouTube in the chat? I don't know.
I know it doesn't really allow them in, like, see, you know, after the fact when the video is posted. I know it doesn't generally allow them in the comments, like the below the video comments.
All right. Then that's the case. Then
Okay.
that's the case, Jason. Jason, if you you can either text it to me or text it to me, and I'll see if I can paste. He has that link to that Batwoman website that he was talking about.
So we haven't talked much about horror, you know, and traditionally, of course, that's another genre. Well, sometimes everybody gets redshirted, you know, where it's you know, bury your gays crops up a lot, you know, but there's also, you know, Winona Earp is a nice crossover example that, you know, blends a lot of horror with the weird Western. You know, but there's some other things out there that I think are, you know, doing a better job with representation on queer characters. I'm sort of running through a mental list to see what comes back.
I kind of have one. If you consider, say, The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina in any way, I mean, it's not like slasher horror or anything like that. It is more of a tongue-in-cheek kind of horror. But they have a transgender character on there who goes through, excuse me, who goes through those feelings of transitioning from, I believe it's female to male. It's been a while since I watched the series, and who has a significant other who rides along with it. You know, there doesn't appear to be any kind of barrier there. There doesn't appear any kind of resistance there. It is, I love you, and, you know, wherever you end up, I love you. And I thought that was a great, great positive message for transgender issues.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because there are a bunch of queer characters on Riverdale, which I haven't seen a ton of, but I've seen, you know, bits and pieces of, as well as the new Nancy Drew. George, I think, is a lesbian. And I think there's other queer characters as well. Again, that's one of the ones that I'm kind of like, I pop in and out of. It kind of wanders around in the fabulous land of, and now a bunch of 28-year-old actors are going to pretend to be in high school. And it's like, I just find it a little jarring. Like, oh, just make them college age and get it over with. I don't believe she has a curfew. I think she's like 30, just saying.
Oh, wasn't like Tom Welling like 28 when he played the 16-year-old Clark Kent in Smallville?
This is unrelated to this topic, but entertaining from an age perspective. I'm a fan of the Fast and Furious franchise, which somebody has described as being like superhero movies only with cars and explosions. And in the most recent one, they bring back a character from Tokyo Drift. So the actor's got to be in his late 40s by now. In Tokyo Drift, he still looked like he was in his late 40s, but they had him playing a high school student. It's just like, you know, maybe if he was locked in an airless room with a great deal of cigarette smoke for a very long time, but otherwise, no.
Yeah, it's that Hollywood age magic.
You know, just thinking for a while there was that whole series of TV shows that all set in high schools, clearly populated by people far older than anyone I went to high school with.
what's that one TV show? They just got a second season. It's gonna be premiering soon. There's an Asian girl and a white girl in it, and they're like friends in high school. But I believe like one of them is like almost pushing 40, and she's playing like a 17 or 18-year-old high school girl. And I forget what TV show that is, but it's just amazing to see that because when you see like regular shots of her in public, she's got like this kind of hair, and she looks look like an adult. But on the show, they've got like the big bangs and the hair covering down to here, and it's like, oh, that makes her look like she is a teenager, and it works. It's amazing that it works, but you're like, she's like in her 30s.
Wow. Yeah, it's certainly a thing that some performers pull off better than others. So all of this is making me realize that at this point, is there anything science fictional on network TV these days?
On network TV? Oh, I couldn't
Yeah,
begin to
just
tell you.
like, the regular WB channels. So I'm just thinking, I can't think of anything. And for a while, there was, a spate of magical realism shows and things like that. And now it's just like, I think it's all cop shows and,
When you're talking about ABC, NBC, CBS, that kind of thing, as opposed to Sci-Fi Channel or something like that?
As opposed to, WB, which has a huge number of science fiction, fantasy themed shows.
Okay.
It just sort of seems like there isn't anything on network TV, but I don't know if I'm missing something or not.
Okay.
I mean, I suppose CBS moved the Star Trek stuff over to CBS All Access.
Right.
So.
Well, now Paramount.
Oh, Paramount Plus.
CBS All Access is now Paramount Plus.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Oh. Yeah. Oh, actually, speaking of Paramount, the Peacock Network thing, I think it's just called Peacock, but is doing this. I've only seen one episode so far, but it's a show about these 4 Muslim British women who start a punk band called We Are Lady Parts. The show is called We Are Lady Parts. The band is called Lady Parts. And I don't know what it's going to look like for queer content. I'm assuming there's going to be some because it's so campy. But there's a lot of magical realist elements of it in it. They have visions and stuff happens. And it looks like it'll be pretty interesting, but I haven't seen the rest of season 1, so I'm not sure what else happens after the point that I've seen where they're trying to get the band together.
Jason Tucker says, what's network TV? We got a comment from Eric Munz. Jeffrey Bauer Chapman plays an openly gay doctor on Doogie Kamahala MD, and he was a judge on RuPaul's Drag Race.
You're right. It's not just cop shows. There's medical shows too.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. I see that Larry Sanderson had mentioned La Brea on NBC, which is some kind of dinosaur-related time travel. I've only seen the commercials for it, but it is some kind of science fiction adjacent related show.
It's waving politely at science fiction. Got it.
Jason Tucker says, Days of Our Lives is apparently practically Dark Shadow these days.
These days, I think it's always tried to be some kind of edgy, almost Santa Barbara-ish, supernatural science fiction. We're going to weave some of that weirdness into the plot kind of daytime show. You'd mentioned campy. If you want to see something really, really fun and campy, it's an animated series called Q-Force. And the main character is voiced by Sean Hayes. It's about a group of, I guess, CIA type agents who are run by the main character who is a gay character, and then has various other kinds of. There's another gay character who does a lot of drag and does a lot of cross dressing. A lot of costume. He's a master of disguise, so his go-to disguise are women. So and it's hilarious and it's super campy if you want to just watch a half-hour camp. First season it was on Netflix or it might have been Netflix. It was on Netflix, I think. So, but yeah, it's a super fun series, and them just having to navigate the world of being government agents and doing these funny missions. I think you might like it.
Catherine, this one's for you since you're such a CW fan. Larry Sanderson says Stargirl on CW.
I've seen one episode. Are there queer characters on Stargirl? Real question. I don't know.
Larry? No?
I've seen one episode too. I didn't get into it right away, but I think it was also because it was in amongst all the other CW shows that I was loving watching at the time, Supergirl and Flash and all that stuff. So I didn't feel like starting another one while those were still going. So
I like Jason's comment. Marlena is possessed, period. Again, period.
I guess that's a Days of Our Lives thing.
Yeah, honestly, it can be applied to so many other situations. Swap names in and out.
Way back in the day, I used to watch All My Children with my dad, and they had this plot of where one of the characters turned out to be a twin, and so there's the good twin and the evil twin, and the actor won an Emmy for playing opposite twins. But yeah, they've been going there for years.
All right, I know we're. Anything else? I know we're not quite out of time, but anything from anybody in the audience or our panels?
I'm trying to remember the name of the Tatiana Maslany show. The one where she plays multiple characters. Orphan Black.
Oh.
Never saw it. Okay.
17 clones, at least one of whom is gay.
Okay.
Yeah, again, that's one of those series I think I watched through the first 2 seasons and then I lost track of it.
Jason mentioned not necessarily queer, but definitely campy, Fantastical, What We Do in the Shadows.
Actually, the new Taika Waititi's Wellington Paranormal, I'm pretty sure that one of the cops is a lesbian.
Okay.
I think. Or is coded so heavily Kiwi, I can't tell. I'm not sure. The endless question. You go to the farmer's market. Farmer, farmer's wife, dyke, not sure.
All right. Well, we'll thank you, Larry. Thank you, Catherine. We'll wrap it up here. I just want to say right now we're going to take our dinner break. And so we'll be coming back at 7 p.m. for our next panel, which is the Ask a DM Level Up panel, our annual panel for people who might want to ask questions from our panel of experienced DMs. And then after that, at 8:30, on Expanded Universe After All, how is the Star Wars universe changing? Jason will be monitoring that one. And of course, if you want to continue discussing anything, we have our our Discord channels where we have games and discussions going on. And there's some role-playing games going on still, as Larry mentioned earlier. And so thank you all for listening in. And we will be back at 7 o'clock.
Thank you.